Hey there, my name's Mark McCartney, and welcome to the What is a Good Life podcast. Over the last 3 years, I've interviewed over 200 people around this question, not to prescribe you with a universal answer, but to help you to find or define your own answer to this question, or at least to explore it. I'm hoping the guests' musings, explorations, experiences, and processes prompt your own inquiry into what this question means for you. While I'm also trying to share with you what I perceive to be more genuine expressions of the human experience and indeed more meaningful conversations. Which brings us to this week and the 93rd episode of the What is a Good Life podcast. And I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Kemo Camara. Kemo is the visionary behind Omek, a community-centric platform whose mission is to amplify the voices, talent, and the energy of biculturals of African descent. A social entrepreneur, community influencer, economist, and captivating speaker, Kemo's journey has spanned continents, with impactful engagements across Africa, the United States, and Europe. He has held extensive leadership roles and responsibilities in community organizations and co-founded multiple businesses and non-profit organizations in Europe and the US. His passion lies in activating our collective human potential, bringing people from diverse backgrounds together to work towards a common goal. In this wonderful conversation, Kemo takes us on his journey of building community and realizing more purpose in his life. He discusses the insights around community he gained from his upbringing and family in Guinea, the values of trust, dignity, and respect that were instilled in him, and the energy that we drain from ourselves by constantly having our guards up. This entire conversation is a great example of the importance of reflection, understanding who we are, and paying attention to the feedback that life provides in order to utilize all aspects of ourselves to realize greater purpose in our lives. Look, I enjoyed this conversation immensely. I think in a world where people are trying to find their purpose, Kemo's experiences show how purpose can be revealed to us over time and how we can build up to it. So I assume you're going to take a lot from this conversation as well. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if you're on the podcasting platforms, please continue to leave your lovely reviews. They're greatly appreciated. If you want to find out more about Kemo's work, please check out the show notes below, as well as for ways of contacting me, whether that's for one-on-one coaching for your own self-inquiry, to join my weekly free silent conversation groups, or to help your leadership teams build greater trust, connection, and communication. You can also find a link to the podcast newsletter where you can read about the reflections that the conversations you are listening to are evoking in me. So that's all I have to say for this week. I look forward to carrying on the conversation with you next week. And so without further ado, the 93rd episode of the What is a Good Life podcast. Kemo, thank you so much for joining me today on the What is a Good Life podcast. After having had our last conversation with you and having had a look at your work, I've been really excited to see where this conversation goes today.
It's a privilege to be here. So I'm glad you decided to invite me to the podcast. So thank you.
My absolute pleasure. So look, the first question, as I've told you about already, is the question of: is there a question you're trying to answer as you move through life?
Wow, that's
A simple one to start with, right?
Simple one, but like a major question. Usually when you go on the podcast, they warm me up, and then they drop these things right in the middle or the end. But you're like, let's get started with that.
Yeah.
The question that I'm trying to answer to life is like, I think we all know this. Like I'm assuming as a human being, everybody's on this journey. Like whatever is the journey is like, what is the purpose? Like, what is the purpose of life? What is my purpose? Why am I here for? And I think that's bigger question. But I think for me, the question that I'm trying to answer now that I'm at this part of my career or like this age, it's like, what kind of impact? Like, what kind of impact do I want to make in the world? Um, that is informed more by my by background. Like I grew up in very um collective society, and then within that society I also grew up in the family that's like a really community driven, like really big family where you have like one space, a lot of people living. Like in a compound we'll have like a lot of people growing up living in the same compound. Like you have a uncles, aunties, friends, cousins, like everybody's living there. So the community is like a huge part of who I am. And then within that community, you quickly realize that it's not about you, me, myself, and I. It's like not that. It's like probably me, myself, and us. Like there's this concept and of us, but you, what is your role within that us, within that collective system? So for me, I grew up in that, and that's part of my DNA, and so that informed everything that I do. Like, yeah, my basic philosophy in life is the best way I help myself is by helping other. Because when I help other people, the sensation that I get from that is like, yeah, there's nothing compared to that, right? And so that become again the bigger part of that question now that I'm trying to answer in life. Is like, how do I continue to do that? What is the most effective way for me to impact, make an impact in this world? And this world mean us people, because that's the most important element, um, in our society, us people. So like, how do I make an impact on the people that I get to interact with? So yeah, that's I don't know if that make any sense.
Oh, that absolutely makes sense. And if I've started with big questions, you've come up with big themes as well. So
But I try to
this,
unravel that. That's a nice
yeah,
way to like.
yeah. This, just out of interest, just even on some of your reflections on like what is the purpose of this life, where have some of your thoughts or meanderings gone in that direction?
There's two part to it. There's two part to my answer to this. One, because I'm like a very spiritual person, and so like anybody who's a spiritual kind of understand that there's that answer to it, right? Like as a spiritual person, there's like that answer that's really sometimes really really clear to you. But like in general, um I see that my purpose is to leave this place at least better than it was, or at least like the way it was. But like I feel like the the time that we came on this world, maybe that's the same for everybody. It's like a such a mess. So like you can't just leave it the way it is. So at least trying to make an impact, to make it, to leave it at least better than you found it, right? And so I think for me that's my purpose. My purpose in life here is to support order, is to help order, is to make the society that I live in, the community that I live in, the environment that I am in better than it was. So, and that goes to the smallest nucleus like I am in, like starting with my family. Like, what is my interaction with my wife? What is my interaction with my kids? Because there's other one I'm with the whole time. Like, how do, if people go on and ask them like, what do you think about chemo? If those people cannot have like a good thing to say about me, like irrespective of what I do in the world, it's nothing. It's all fake. So you start from like the smallest nucleus, right? And then you go like your friends or like your family, or siblings and parents. Like, what do they think about you? How you make an impact there? Like, do you make them happy when you're around, or they're happy when you're not around? Right? So what does that look like? It's not even material. Like your presence there, like how do you make them feel? Like you're just being really conscious about that. Then it goes like your friends, right? And then like your circle of friends, how do they feel about you when you're around them? Do they see you as an asset, or do they see you like you just don't matter, right? And so for us, like even like there's this idea when you live in the place, your neighborhood, like usually we live especially in the west here, you live in the apartment complex, or you live in single, like there's this environment. If you live, for those who live in the big apartments and stuff, like you come in, you have your apartment, you open the door in this box that you go in and close, so everybody just enter. Sometimes you don't even interact with these people around you. Like sometimes you get in the elevator, you don't even say hi to them. Like that's so common here in the west. But like for me, like if I go in places like what is, I have a purpose. Like if I don't live here anymore, would they notice I'm not here? Right? So I ask that question. So like people around me, even this simple smile, like I get in the elevator with them, I just like a simple conversation, like it just brighten their life. That's totally impact. The simple smile, the simple conversation, those things. So like people around you in your space, when you're not there, they should notice that you're not there, like in the positive way. And then it kind of grows out that way. Like, okay, when you build a bigger community, what does that mean? What kind of impact that you're making? So like that simple way of thinking, from like, yeah, the smallest nucleus of your environment to like grow out. It goes all the way to community, then it can go to your city, how you involve there, and then like a bigger, like company, and then all that stuff. So for me, that's how I'm thinking. So that applying the idea of this purpose. What is the purpose of my life? It's just, how do I make people's life better?
I absolutely love this, and I love the focus, almost from the inside out. Like, the what's the smallest, or the my family, the immediate people that are in my vicinity for most of the time. How do they feel about me? I'm always very suspicious when people are trying to make big changes in the world, um, and their life may seem like a mess, other than outside of doing the a big project or whatever it may be to influence culture, society, whatever it may be. I think having the fundamentals of life, like what would my in my case, what would my wife, okay, my daughter's one, but what would they say about me if I'm not there? Like, or what would other people in my neighborhood think about me? I think this is a wonderful thing to hold, or even just to revisit, or to keep in mind, as to what the order and the importance of the work is. Because I don't know, if somebody doesn't have that part of their life, I think some of the messaging or the experience or the feeling rings kind of quite hollow, if that part of it isn't there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a foundation. It is a foundational element of society. Like a
Yeah.
family is like a foundation, right? Everything just spin from there. And so like if this foundation is not like right, then yeah, there's something missing. I mean, I'm not saying like, because I don't know people personally, but like when you think about it, like even sometimes the leaders that we have, like if someone is like the most horrible human being to their immediate family, and then usually like we have a lot of people in the leadership that might be that we don't know,
Hmm.
but like think about, they want to make this such a grandiose impact on society, but like, yo, you have the basic element here that they wouldn't even want to be around you. And sometimes we can see some of those like, playing around, like their families coming out and then saying that, like, um it may not be because we don't know personally, but like think about it, like even sometime in the movie, like you see there's like an example that's portrayed that way, but it's like really crucial, like if you start thinking from this perspective, like what, like I'm not saying like you don't have a personal issue with your family and stuff, like it might be valid, but like, are you a good human being? Are you thinking about that? Like, are you thinking of like, what would these people think about me? Am I good like to them? And because usually that's like a hard work.
Yeah, yeah.
Whoever is married or have a kid, like how hard is that thing? Like, so if you can manage that, that's like almost your training ground, right? So that's why it's important. And then I think for this, like this is like how I was raised. This is the kind of
Hmm.
family I come from. So like for me, it's natural to say that because I grew up and so I seen that. I seen my parents do this, and then that's like really part of it. But like even if you take a step back, the tribe that I come from, like in Guinea, the Mandingo tribe, this is embedded in the system, right? Even the way the vocabulary, the way they talk about the family nucleus, the name of like the naming system, the brother, the dad, the uncle, the sister, like that whole the way is created is like this type of relationship. Like how do you relate to yourself? How do you rely on yourself? How do you support each other? So like that's naturally embedded in the system. So that cultural part is like, that's part of like, that's what I started off. Like I come from like a very collective society. And so for me, the more I started reflecting on this and being a lot more intentional about it, and being, educating myself about my culture, and then like, so it become easier for me to articulate this and then embed it into like the work that I do and then who I am as a person.
What was that like, growing up, where you had such a strong sense of, people living their message, I guess. But then even then, you're saying from your own culture as well, the sense of like just the embeddedness, the relationality between all these roles. Like they're not just, we're not just giving people names. There's a responsibility or a service with that as well. Like when you say this is quite innate in you to look at the way the world this way or look at family with this significance, was that like, are there moments that come to mind where that really clicked, or was that just always, it was always in the environment, so it just felt a part of you?
No, it was always in the environment. It was always like that. But growing up into it, like you don't appreciate it. You don't. It is what it is. You just grow up into it. You
Yeah,
have
yeah.
absolutely zero appreciation for it. In fact, like sometimes I used to like be like, man, I don't like this at all. Because I mean, picture that most people maybe in your audience would not understand this because in the Western society, you don't. So you picture like a big house, right? And then you have like a big fence, like a compound to it. And so you have like a main house, and there's like around the compound, there's like a lot of smaller house, like all connected. And so the main house like will be like what dad, mom, uncles, like the elders will live in, and aunties, all this stuff will live in. And then the smaller house like around the compound inside will be like the younger, and then everybody living. And then in the middle in the yard, that's where everything happened. So there's this total human, I call it human technology, that happened. That there's this hierarchy where everybody knows their place, right? Dad and mom, the parent are like the most respectful. Like for us, the system of respect is not, it's like a totally different from the Western part. Like I have never, ever, ever argue with my parent, like ever disrespected them, ever. Like you, that's not even an option, right? And so it's not like it's that type of education, like, and then they also know their role, so they cannot be unfair to you and just to you. They will just educate you to like make sure you feel like respected, make sure you feel the sense of like justice, the sense of dignity, like that whole thing. Not because they are in that level of respect, they're gonna take advantage of it. So like that never happened. So that's why you kind of grew up with like, appreciating that system, right? So there was like this no sense of like a dictatorship or taking advantage. Like I wouldn't take advantage of my role, and they wouldn't take an advantage of their role. So there's this lovely relationship. But when you
Right.
break the rule, you broke the rule, and they will tell you you broke the rule, and there's a consequences for that. So you grew up in this environment knowing also like there's a consequences for your action, right? And so like it was like really clear in that way. And so the elder, you always respect your elders. If you're a big brother, you respect your big brother respect you. Aunties, you respect aunties, aunties will respect you, right? And so like everybody kind of knows their space. And it became this one thing, like this concept of like you are in this environment where you're not so focused on about protecting yourself, protecting your space, all these things that we been taught here. It's not about that. It's like it's not even about you. So everybody's focusing on protecting you because this is a community that we in. This is our family. So everybody's here like respecting you, focusing on supporting you. Then that takes the focus off yourself, and now you're focusing on supporting everybody. So that's the kind of environment, that's the kind family environment that I grew up in, where like if everybody is focused on supporting you, then you like not so much me, myself, and I anymore. So like you're part of that everybody. So you're so focused on everybody else. So like the more you can support other, the happier you are, and the more you're supporting yourself. So that's what I was saying earlier. So I kind of grew up in that environment, where you feel like you have a total dignity, you have a total reliance, so you can trust people, you can rely on people, right? And but you feel like you're part of here, you are welcome, you belong there. Like all these terms that we like feel like with like the society, like empathy, like sense of belonging, sense of identity, like these are all natural part in that system. Like I just grew up in that. For me, that was like it was the thing, right? And also I have like my mom, for instance. I just got this from my mom. My mom come from this perspective where she give you trust first, right? It's up to you to like what to do with it, right? And so some people come from the other way. Like you have to build that trust. You don't earn my trust until you build it. Like my mom will be like, you like when we connect, like or see you are like a trustworthy person, then you get it, right?
Yeah.
And then it's up to you to protect that trust. And then like if you break it, then that's up to you, on you, right? And so like in the environment, like you grow up, I took that, like I'm like that kind of way. So I'm not like from the beginning of our relationship, like investigating and all this stuff, like so it kind of like grew up in this um environment where all this like a big element that we're struggling with now as a community, as a society, that was like already part of who I am.
Oh man, and even just the three of the words you said there, the sense of dignity, trust, and belonging, like that's it's such kind of gorgeous words to wrap around the experience that you're describing there. I fully agree with you as well. This sense of I don't know if I feel my trust always like this. There can be a functional trust that people may say they need someone to prove something to them, but for me, there's a deeper sense of humanity and connection and trust where as long as you don't give me a blatant reason not to trust you, like if there's not something crazy you've done in the first moments of our interaction, I don't know. I think that's one of the fundamentally important aspects of life, and probably very much how you're going to relate to community or a
Hmm.
society around you.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, people get surprised. Like you always see these like Westerners when they go on in Africa or go in like a South America, like in the southern country where you like have the community there, like you're foreigners, a stranger in their community, they're so happy to have you, right? They're
Right.
so nice to you. Like you sometimes you're like, wait, what is going on here? And it's just like absolutely they don't want nothing from you. They're just like you are here. And you know what I'm saying? That's that kind of trust as a human. They
Yeah.
want to make you welcome, like this sense of like you're a stranger, then we have this obligation of like, so that is that kind of like, because when some people hear sometimes when you're like, oh, I trust you from the get-go, they're like, oh, it's like they kind of think about the extreme side where like, oh, don't be an idiot, like people are
Yeah.
out there to get you, or like you're gonna be like, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like human relationship, right?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I just wanted to put that there so you kind of understand.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I'd absolutely agree, but I also think when people do throw that, if they make an assumption of naivety or something on my
Hmm.
behalf, like I'm cool with someone taking my trust and breaching it. I just I don't have to give it back. Like I don't have to. The relationship doesn't have to maintain, and that's okay. Like or maybe I do want to trust them again. Who knows? Like, but there's I don't know. I think we aside from what's the astute thing to do or not, I don't know. I think there's so much we limit like our sense of connection to people, our capacity to love, our capacity to feel by looking at these other humans that are all on the same, like wherever you're coming from, all on the same kind of experience we're having of, breathing, eating, sleeping, drinking, aspiring, loving, caring, dramas in your life, love in your life, all of these things. And I don't know, I think it kind of makes very separate entities of us all, on that deeper sense of trust that we're discussing. If that's not there, I don't know, I think we limit the
Yeah.
possibilities. Like we close off so many potentials for connections, even the opportunities that can come with that, even if that isn't the immediate focus of it, but just the sheer number of opportunities or interesting stories or experiences that exist in this life, just purely by from the outset, I'm going to keep my guard up, and eventually if you win me over, I'll let it down.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with what he's saying, but like the other thing too, what it does to you as a human, and I think that's the side of it too. Think
Yeah.
about you having your guard up the whole time. Like, why? Like the toll that have on you. What if there's a no guard? Like, like look at these two people. Like someone has a guard up the whole time, and then you're looking
Mm.
up, you're looking for something, and so, and this person is just like so relaxed, like no, And then I think, well, as you were saying that, I'm looking at again. I took this from my mom, and then like she's older now, but she's like one of the most like sometimes we have a conversation with her, like she's saying like all these people did this, did that, and then so she's so chill about it. She's so happy, like like man, like sometimes we worry, like we do see people sometimes that try really trying to take advantage of that, like,
Yeah.
and then but like you they will be found out, you know what I'm saying? It's either by her or because you have to do something to break that trust, and now are you gonna get that back? That's up to, you know, like that's another question,
Yeah.
right? But you will be found out, like, so you don't have to, like, she really enjoyed her life. She's very happy and very content, and then just like, so that's the aspect of what it does to her as a human being. You know, she has a
Yeah.
much better life because she doesn't have to deal with the guard, you know. So like the impact that it has on you as a human being is like totally is something like the worth yeah, looking into.
I think people don't realize, well, I think even just as you say that the effort and the energy that goes into keeping up a guard. And then also, if you've ever had the experience of not doing something right by somebody, like I'm sure we can all reflect on a moment in our life. Like I know that if I go to bed and I haven't done right by somebody, I know I'm dealing with the consequences of that. Like it's eating or gnawing away at me. Like so I think this also this idea that you can get away with things, or if you're not caught, you know, you won't suffer any consequences. I think the act of that trust part, it runs both ways. Like, you know, just the keeping up the guard, but then also if somebody is untrustworthy, that's them. Like it sounds very much like in your mother's scenario. If they tried to take advantage of something, well, that's on them. Like she has her own perspective on life and seems fine with that.
Hmm. Absolutely.
In terms of just really curious, what was this? What when you just mentioned the experience, it sounds like such a contrast then, like of you know, being at home, this compound, this shared area outside of the main house for the elders and whoever else, but this communal space, and then to the experience then of living in an apartment block and you know these doors that are closed almost and these empty hallways. What's it? Do you do you miss something? Do you what do you cultivate around that, or what's your sense of where you are now?
Ah, yeah, it's a two it's totally two different lifestyle, which that's what I actually enjoy because I'm able to like navigate both now,
Yeah.
right? So moving from Guinea in that community to like the US in the first times, like you kind of come in this like a society where it's like all about myself, me, myself, and I. And so you have to learn how to navigate that. So being in that system now for like almost half of my life. So I understand how it is and how to navigate. And so it's all about like adapting in the environment that you're in, right? And so this is a different environment. That's how it works. And but at the end of the day, we are human. We are like a human who are living in this environment. And so how do you keep the focus on the human aspect of it? Yeah. And so for me, that's what like the community building is always been that mean, right, to do that. So I might be in an apartment environment, like I come in and get in my apartment, but there's other people in the other apartment. The least I can do is to like give them a smile. Like that's the least, right? So those who
Mhm.
are receptive to that, maybe we can exchange one or two conversation, and that keep it building, right? There's a relationship like around that place. I might have like a, you know, like 90% of the people may not care. Like I live in Germany where, you know, the culture is usually like you don't interact with the people, like, so I'll be the one like smiling at people, and I'll do that a couple of times, and then they'll see like the sense of genuine, and then there will be some people like who really don't like it, and then it's kind of like they will always get my smile anyway, but like the other that, you know, have like interaction, you have a conversation, so it kind of like, you know, in that space that those who want to have a conversation, you have a conversation and you just keep moving, you know, and you have a family and then create that. But in the bigger picture, like I always build a community. I've always built community. So I always bring people together, have a shared values, and then, you know, working toward a common goal. So I always surround myself. I just cannot survive without my community. I just, whatever type of community, like people similar, experience, shared value, shared mission, I will always build community and then surround myself and bring people and then kind of try to build that sense of like experience that I had growing up. And so I'll always bring that together. So for me, that's my way of moving forward. So when I was in the US, I built community. When I moved to Germany, build community. Now I do community building. That's a part of my life, So yeah, that's how I kind of um, like a deal with the society that I'm in right now, because we still
Yeah.
live with human being. And so I just bring the humans together.
It's it's I find I was just smiling away there because I'm also one of those people in Germany that are just smiling and saying Guten Morgen or Guten Abend to people and knowing the reactions that that can get sometimes. But there is something really beautiful about just this slow drip. Like, you don't have to confront people. Like, it's a smile, it's a nod, and then just how these, I don't know, I think of all of these interactions almost like as planting a seed. And then, the next time we see each other, maybe there'll be a pause, or maybe even just there's people in my neighborhood that I've never said more than hello to, but they give me a big wave and a smile from across the street. And just when you said there, like, I can't survive without my community. Like, I genuinely think that knowing a number of people in my neighborhood is honestly one of the greatest joys that exists in my life. Like, it's not going to appear on some, I don't know, highlights of my life from someone looking at it from the outside, but from the felt experience of it, very few things can generate that kind of sense of connection or
Mm.
joy or yeah, just like company, I guess, like, being accompanied on this path.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you a little story in Germany. Um, so like I was living in this neighborhood, very quiet neighborhood, right? When we were first there, like, so we had to park the car on the street. And so when you come late, it's like everybody's home, then it's like there's no parking. So you have to drive around until like someone comes out, and so it was like a midnight. And so I was like driving around, and it was like really hard to find the parking. And there was like this space, like really tight space. And I'm like, oh, I learned how to parallel park so I can squeeze in here. And I learned how to drive in New York. So in New York City, when you drive, it's okay to like hit people's bumper, like when you
Right.
squeeze it in. So that's why sometimes people have like even the bumper, like things that they put on it. That so that kicked in my head, but you don't do that with your German car. So that was my first lesson with the German experience. German and the car knew not. So I was parking, and then like somehow I bump into the car behind me, and just a little bit, but it made a
Right.
noise. And fortunately for me, the building, the owner was like there. He was still awake, and he was there, and he heard the bump, and then he like came out the window and then looked down, and then so it was his car, and then he was so mad, and he started screaming and started yelling, and it's like, I'm gonna call the police, and it was so mad, and he came down. I'm like, dude, I live here, and you my neighbor, and then you gonna react like this? And nothing happened to the car. It's just like a bump, and then he heard the noise. I'm like, look, nothing happened to the car. Like, there's no even a scratch, but he was so mad. And then he's like, curse me out. And then like, I'm like, if you wanna call the police, go on and do it. But I'm like, but this is like really weird, because you and I are gonna continue to see each other. We live here. We live like really next to each other. And so months later, we are always like, I'll take my kids, and then we'll be walking around the neighborhood, and then we'll see each other. And then over, like every time we see each other, I explained it to my wife, right? Every time we see each other, I'll just smile at him. And like by the time it was like a few months and a year, like he had to return the smile back. Like, he just like, he knew, we both knew what happened, right? But I just kept smiling at him. I just kept just simple smile. Like every time we pass each other in the park and things like that, or in the neighborhood, we go by the, ice cream. There's like a nice ice cream place there. We are forced to see each other. We go in the grocery store, we see each other. I'll just smile. And at the point, sometimes, like one day, he just talked to me.
Right.
Like he just talked to me, and then we completely ignore like what happened. We both knew what happened. We completely ignored it, and then it's just like this kind of experience of like this simple smile. It's like it can
Yeah.
just like break like anything. So
That's that's a glorious result for an
Yeah, so I would
auspicious
never,
start.
I would never bumper like into German car anymore. That was the lesson of the story.
with with regards, so the you said earlier the sense of you just know the experience or the value of helping other people. Can you give me a sense of just even your experience with that, like in terms of even that forming more of even your sense of purpose, like even just beyond even like the nucleus of the family and things like that. Like, was this always something, even just you were referring to, even in terms of the dignity that you experienced, or the respect in the house, or the looking after the total rather than the individual? And just curious as to what your sense of that is.
Again, like this didn't happen when I was. I said this earlier. This didn't happen when I was living into it. Like when I was in it, it was just like this really happened. Like I the reflection on it
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
and then like
yeah.
understanding my purpose, and then like really being on that journey that I was like really thinking back. I'm like, oh, this is the source. This is where it all come from, right? And then for me to be aware of that, like especially when I was in the US, I was working in the corporate. I came in there with like a lot of energy, like I have to succeed. I'm going to the corporate space, and like so my all these things was didn't make any sense, but it was already part of my life. I really appreciated my family and then all that, and I was working the corporate space and then building community building in the evening. So I was like navigating between these two. Um, so again, the reflection when that happened, I was just doing like the things, the action, and the work. Um, the more I was looking at my corporate life and my community building, and then the more reflection that I was doing, like like what am I trying to accomplish as I was becoming successful in my career space? Like what's the more important? I remember specifically one day I was talking to this guy in the corporate space, that like they assigned me to a mentor, and then he was asking me this question like, what makes you happy? And then I was saying like, oh, if I go in the community space, like the sense of fulfillment that I get there is amazing. Like I love bringing people. Like I was nothing to do with the career, and then he was just listening to me like, yo, I'm supposed to be a mentor to like help you how you navigate your career. Everything he's telling me right now is about community, and it's like, yo, have you thought about this? Like you everything that you say in the community building, have you thought about going in politics? I'm like, no, I don't want to be like, I hate like that's not it. Just that I close that part. It's like maybe like there's an older role like a city council, like all these stuff, like because it's about helping people. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about like an older career to do with the community building. So that's where like again the sense of reflection of like, oh, maybe I can do something with this, right? And even in that space, my manager, I used to organize like community activities within the corporate space because that's what I do. Like I bring people together, and so I play football too. So I build a football team within the company, and then I said, hey, whoever want to play football, we create our team and we'll play in the evening, right, in the league. And so my manager will come in there because I was in the leadership. Like he will come in there, so he will see me how I was leading people, and he was just amazed like by my leadership skill outside the company with that. And it's like, yo, like you have something here, right? Try figure out what to do with it, but you like you like it's mesmerizing to see you like in this space. So I kept keeping that in mind, and so this is like really vivid. Like in my head, one time, like I'll go work one day I was working and it's like really busy and it's like a really successful week at my corporate space, like saving a lot of money, and then like really our team did like a really really good job, and I'm like, man, I saved this company, this company is like a few millions and all that stuff, and then it's being recognized for it. So there's like that sense of like, yeah, happiness, and then doing that you're good at your job. And then in the evening I go to this community activity thing, and it just for me the simple facts of like like seeing an elder person come in, getting up and then giving them the chair, and it's like, hey, what can I get you? Can I get you water? Can I get you this? And then going to do that one action the sense of fulfillment that I got from that, and then saving the company like this much money during the day was like not even comparable. And so that's when the things started really clicking in my head. I'm like, just making this like a older person like a smile, and then giving them the seat, and then they sit in front because I had like a really good seat, and then like giving them that sense of dignity and then everything. And then me going back and then just like that. That's what I started really paying attention to, like, yo, like the feeling that I get here, because I used to do it just naturally, and I would just never happen. But like those two conversations that happen in the company from these people, and then me saying this, and then started paying attention to these things, and it's like a little by little. So this became the genesis of it, and until now, like as I'm building the work that I'm doing, and it just got me into like a very intentional education about me, about my culture, about my history, and like that whole thing. That's what now I'm like really became, it became like easy, clear to me to like where all this come from and how to articulate and all that stuff, if that makes sense.
That's that's absolutely glorious. So, like, that got me a little bit misty eyed there. Even just the sense of fulfillment from that one simple kind act, far surpassing, a real high in a career sense, but realizing very quickly that the two feelings weren't comparable. Like, I think that's like, this life seems to give us so much kind of interesting or powerful feedbacks or messages. I think, or ways of directing us if we're paying attention to our surroundings, or paying attention to how we're even responding or reacting to our surroundings. I sometimes think that this life is so much more simpler than we even allow ourselves to believe it is. But when I hear things like this, or whether it's me or you smiling or saying hello to a neighbor, it just life can completely reinforces the how simple it can be in some ways, in terms of sensing or appreciating fulfillment when it's there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you say one thing, and just paying attention.
Yeah,
A lot of the time we don't, and then the signs is there, like we're so busy by all the noises, and it's like really hard. And yeah, because like for me it wasn't like, and then I didn't even appreciate before that side of it. I mean, because I just grew up in it. Like I saw my parents
yeah,
doing it. It's like that was a natural part. This is what you do. Like, what do you mean? That's something. That's what you do. Like for me, the thing that I appreciated more was the hard work at school, the hard work at in the corporate space, trying to succeed, chasing all these things. That's the most important thing.
yeah,
This other thing that's natural to me, that I do effortlessly, that's a part of my DNA. Like I use it, that word, very intentionally. Like that was like, no, it's like, getting up in the morning and breathing, and it's like, and so like I started thinking about it, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, like, no, this is not natural to everyone, this is important. And it's like, the more I did the research, the more I like became conscious of it, the more it was obvious. And then the other thing too, like, yeah, in this conversation, we're comparing these two, right? But it doesn't have to be a dichotomy. I think if you get to the point where you can understand this, how you feel about both, and then you can like figure out how you embrace both, how you navigate, then I
yeah,
think putting yourself in that position become like, yeah, this sense of fulfillment, right? And then now, like, because like if you're not aware of it, then you start chasing something, and it's like it kind of create this false dichotomy between the two of them, and it's like, oh, they're not compatible, like I have to focus on this. And it's like forgetting an important part of yourself, and it's just becoming this mess where you don't even realize. And the more you realize this, and the more you put yourself, the more you're able to like control it, and then use it and navigate it, then that's where you start getting to that point where it's like, oh man, this is making sense. And then this idea of like simple, then it started becoming like that simple for you, because like now you're not fighting, you're just like, oh, this is me, you're embracing buff into your life. And then you know how you feel when you hear, you know how you feel when you hear, you know how you feel, what to do with buff. Like you start kind of a balancing your life. So yeah, I mean, it's a journey, but once you start getting there, that's where um yeah, you start getting to a point where you're kind of happy with some things.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very astute comment to make, and not to make a dichotomy of it. And the just out of interest, the experience you brought up there of even setting up a football team and just the a manager kind of seeing that your performance in a leadership kind of role outside of the day-to-day stuff, I'm kind of being mesmerized by it. Was that also I don't know, was that quite a clear signal from your environment as to what like your strengths may be, or kind of what maybe what like you were revealing to yourself, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's when I started like looking at that part a little bit as a strength because I've done this. That's what I do like in the evening, right? So
Mm,
I had just completely compartmentalized these two life,
right.
right? So like this other life, I've done this. I like this is so effortless for me. This is what I enjoy. Like this is my thing. Like I do this. But it's like there's no. It was hard to make a connection between that skill that I have there and then the corporate skill. So it was like, this is not even a skill. This is something I do. Like, this is me, like waking up in the morning and smiling and playing with my family. It's like that simple. But like when now, like you have a corporate space and you have like this conversation and these people are like kind of like making the connection. That's when you're like, oh, and then that's where the light bulb for me started happening. And then the more I started realizing, I'm like, oh, this is now I can articulate it like these are the soft skill, these are the human skill that you have. And then I started realizing, oh, this corporate space is so poor, they are so deprived from this human skill that I have. That I started oh man, look, this is something that I can actually start bringing in the corporate space. And it just became like a lot of success that I had in the corporate space as well because I started appreciating this human skill. Yeah, that's a long story, but like all the successes that I had in my corporate environment were not because strictly because of my technical skill or my hard skill. It was like me learning how to leverage my human skill, like me learning how to relate to my team, me learning how to have a conversation with my team, and me learning how to motivate my team, me learning to speak to them as a human. And I'm like, this is what I do all the time. Like, so you mean like bringing that in the space here, like making people happy, making people like understand, conversing with them, giving them that sense of dignity, that sense of belonging, like those things that I talked about. Like I know how to do this. I just hadn't connected the two, right? It was like this completely two separate things. So yeah, once those little things started triggering, like that conversation with the guy, I was like, hey, can you look into like maybe going into like a city council or like politicians, like, oh, you see a value into what I'm telling you right now that I'm passionate about, like bringing it here. And then also my manager doing that, and it's like, oh, okay, me, like the moment I started realizing that, it was just like, oh man, here you go.
It's I love the sense of like the connections that you seem to make between in different areas of life, and not no longer kind of compartmentalizing them, or seeing that they can both combine, or it doesn't mean that one part of you is split off. There can be a way for a union between it as well. Just out of interest, then, like what was the point for you where you kind of jump off, or you leave the specific roles behind to pursue, just more community building in general, like it just, or that being the primary focus of your, the company's work? Like what was there a point where this became, I don't know, like a building sense of purpose or a commitment to that purpose? And you were saying earlier the questions you have around, well, what's the purpose of this life on a wider sense? What's the purpose of my life? Like, what was the point that led you to kind of go off and do some of your own things around community?
To be honest, it was a long journey. It was yeah, this was at least a 10-year journey.
Hmm.
That whole 10 into like, me finally deciding what I want to do and then taking this away. But like, yeah, with, this little by little, but because I was like really involved in both, first they were like completely compartmentalized. And then I started realizing and I started like bringing them together, and then I started seeing the success in the corporate space. And so like I kept doing that. And then I started bringing both, like into like I bring my human skill into the corporate space, but also like bring the hard skill, the experience, and the like into the community space, right? Because like communities sometimes they have like this aspiration, this bringing people, but like in the technical like strategy and then all that stuff, like that's not sometimes there. And so like that also got me really what every community that I go in, like they just gave me put him in the leadership position because they're like, oh, you can do this, you can do that. Like, really, we need help. And so, yeah, you have this idea, you want to get here. Like, here's a strategy A, B, C, D. Put this in place and then go. And so, like every community I find myself, it was like, so I kind of like started, like navigating these two. So that journey started like really building. And so again, my overall picture was like, how do you, like help a community move from a point A to point B? How do you help even a country move it from a point A to point B? That's actually one of the reasons why I left Guinea to go to the US in the first place, right? So that was always a part of that purpose. So the community building, but I think countries like in the macro level. So long story short, like it was a time like about 10, almost 10 years now, we moved from the US to Germany. And so I did my master in development and economics and an international study, right? Again, along this, because in the US, I was like in the corporate space, I work in finance and I work and then I was like, I have all this piece of the puzzle here, community building, like a corporate space, a strategy, and then all that stuff, human connection, leadership. Like I have all these things I've been practicing for a long time. And development economics was like this macro level. How do you apply that from the country perspective? So I was really excited to go into that. And so that one I did like, my master, like understanding the system and all that. And so I wanted to, after I graduated, I wanted to go back to the corporate space. But I had this idea of building this community of a younger generation and then, like giving them the tools and resources and then empower them and then almost building this next type of leaders, right? And because of all the things that I've learned, especially like, and most importantly, like being able to embrace these two almost culture, right? Like, growing up in the, the culture of growing up in the compound, that human technology, and now being able to successfully navigate the culture in the West, which was about me, myself, and I. And I mean, navigating that, the community and the corporate space, navigating like this bicultural that I call the term, this bicultural identity, and like realizing it can be a superpower. And for me, it was like, okay, it would be great to build a community so you can like really empower this next generation to become this like the transformational leader that we want to see, right? And so that's when like it really was like, let me try this. If I don't, I will regret it my whole life. I knew that was like 100% clear. Like if I don't do this, I will regret it because I was so passionate and it was so clear to me. Like I've done research, I've done this my whole life. I'm an example of it, right? The way I was like now very confident in my identity, like knowing who I was and my purpose and all that. Like I was like, a guinea pig of it. And then like doing the research, having a conversation with hundreds of people, I was like, there's a need for this space. And then I'm like, I've been built my whole life to do this, like having
Yeah.
that clear, like it was so crystal clear, and it's still like really clear to this day. And then that's when it was like, all right, at least let me give it a year, let me go on and build this thing, this space. And I know how to build community. This is what I do in my sleep. I've been in the corporate space, I know how. So this is like the combination of those two things that I've been doing the whole time. Let's go on and figure it out. And that's where the journey started.
Man, I really like in your path how it's never either or, it's a fusion of both. And even just the realizations at different times, even if you didn't realize it in the present moment, even then there's this component of reflection where you're always kind of like you're not leaving some part of your path behind. It's just it almost seems like it's just a fusing or a dissolving of it all into the your your purpose, your story, your mission. Like, really curious how just the sense of that moment, and I don't know if it was one moment, but when it did crystallize so clearly for you, was that a moment, or was that again a gradual thing, but just a moment before you started this?
No, that was like, I mean, it was still a gradual, but like it was, yeah. Once that crystal, I'm like, I have to do this. Like, I
Yeah,
think it was like, it took a few months to like really, cross this idea, because I was, at the same time I was like trying to go back in the corporate space, but it became really clear, like if I go back in the corporate space, it will be really, really hard to do this, and if I
right,
don't do it now, I will regret it.
right.
Right. So that was like go back and forth, and then knowing, once it became really clear that I was gonna regret it in my life, I was like, all right. So the things that I was, the secret was, give it a year, right? Just give it a 1 year. If it work, great, then you keep doing it. And if it doesn't work, at least you try it. You can come back later. You go back to work. So like it
Yeah.
was like a cushion that was, which was really mentally, it kind of removed that thing. I was like, okay, a year is not, and yeah, it's been almost 6 years now. It's happening. So,
And I love I just love the fusion of almost like your deep values and then a collection, and that's is almost innate even just from upbringing, and then a living and breathing what you're talking about, and then in integrating of all the different facets of your experience. It almost like these moments in life where we think life has been preparing us for a moment, or has been guiding us, or directing it. I think I know it's just a really nice. I think even the way you describe how you're paying attention through it, and all of these things, I think it's just a really beautiful example of also a bit like some degree of patience. Like this sense of, often when people have purpose, we almost want to just figure it out right now. But I think more often, the more people I talk to, it's this sense making or meaning making as we go through life
mhm.
that delivers us towards something, rather than something that you have to figure out right now and dedicate yourself to now. Like there's so many things outside of the focus that you end up having that can train you, or prepare you for it. Kimo, just given all that we've kind of been discussing, and just this sense of, what is my purpose? What is even the broad, on a broader level, what is the purpose of life? Clearly, the importance of family in that for you, community, an element of spirituality you were saying as well. Unfortunately, we didn't get to touch on that. But just life experiences, realizing what fulfills you, this lovely image, even of just giving an old person their seat and asking them if they want something, just paying attention, even afterwards, how that made you feel. This lovely kind of core tenets of dignity, trust, and belonging. And the lovely example of just giving your trust away, while people could think that's naive. Like, it does a hell of a lot more damage to us if we're always keeping our barriers up
Mm.
and wanting people to earn that. Really curious to hear your answer to the question of what is a good life for you.
Good life is, it's when like your value, like when you have a piece of, you see, as the people say, peace of mind, but I think it's like, if you have a peace of mind, but also like whatever you don't align with your values. And so like if you, I think more like in your heart, right? I
Mm,
think like you can be like really materialistically successful at work, or like in front of the community, or like all that stuff. But like when there's no balance between your values and the things that you're doing internally, there's like always something happening. Like, in your gut, um like you not settle, and so when you have the peace in that internally, like where the things that you're doing align with your values, right, and where you have your content, where you're happy with it, it doesn't mean that you don't work hard to whatever, but like internally, like when you have that internal peace, that's good life. Like, so whether you want to call that happiness or whatever, but like I think having this sense of internal peace, for me, that's personally a good life. And so I may be doing a lot of things, like a lot of the time, like, and I'm always paying attention to my values. Like, am I going and am I doing this? Like, is this aligned with my values? Like, when, like, and if it doesn't align, like there's thing that triggers it, like, and then nobody will know it because it's internally. And so like, people may see me like, oh man, you are like good life and successful, that's excellent, but like internally, like as long as I don't have that, like it's not a good life. But when I have that, I have like this peace with myself. So for me, that's a good life.
Man, I love this answer. And, I think what you point to as well, it's more so even just the felt experience of it. Like, the way I think sometimes when people think about values, they think about picking 5 words that represent them. But I really think the values piece is, I'm glad you mentioned the sense of heart as well there. Like when I breach my own values, like I feel a
Hmm.
disconnect, like I feel a pain or a suffering that I'm probably going to have to go back and figure something out, because it just won't sit well. It won't bring me peace. So yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that answer as well. Look, Kemo, thank you so much for your time here today and for all that you've shared, and for the, I don't know, I think the really fascinating insights from it as well, for people to glean from your experience and how you're approaching life. So thank you so much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the wonderful conversation. Your questions are amazing, so I appreciate it. I had so
Much
much fun.
much appreciated. Me too, man.